see a difference in the so-called battle for science, this big warfare that's going on out there, between what we see in popular culture and at the academic research level?
I certainly do, Craig. On the academic level, as I said, there's tremendous openness and dialogue between scientists and theologians today. The John Templeton Foundation is pouring millions and millions of dollars into funding this kind of interdisciplinary dialogue, conferences, publication projects. As you may know, John Templeton was the great financier. He has set up large foundations in the United States, in Britain, and elsewhere to help fund this kind of interdisciplinary work. And both Oxford University and Cambridge University have established chairs in science and theology. So there is a flourishing dialogue that's going on today in conferences and peer-reviewed journals and academic publications. But you would never know that from reading the works, the popular level works of a Richard Dawkins or a Lawrence Krauss, people of this sort, where they perpetuate the myth that somehow theology and science are at each other's throats. And this kind of popular level warfare is just not reflective of what's going on in the academy. It's pop culture, and it is not an accurate representation of what real experts in these disciplines are doing today.
No, I would very much concur with that, and I had the opportunity to take a few history of science classes when I was in college and graduate school, and one of the professors that I had there, I ended up getting one of the books that he was an editor of and reading, and it talks about this conflict thesis that science and religion, and specifically Christianity, are in conflict with one another, and they say, from the way the historians talk about it, this conflict thesis is still prevalent and prominent. But from a history of science, the best scholarship in the history of science, it's a non-tenable hypothesis that there have been occasional times of conflict, but often it's been one of mutual benefit or just kind of side-by-side operating independent, that there's a far more complex relationship with these occasional hostilities. And so this idea that they're at war with one another is academically a non-tenable hypothesis, and so I find that very interesting, but nonetheless exactly what I would expect if God's the author of creation and the inspiration for Scripture. So
yeah, I want to second one point that Jeff made, and that is the complexity of the way science and theology interact. This isn't a simple one-one relationship. There are all sorts of ways in which science and theology can interact with each other. For example, theology historically has furnished a conceptual framework in which science can flourish. And many historians would say that's why modern science was birthed in the West rather than in the Orient or in Africa. It was because of the conceptual framework that Christian theology gave to the West that enabled science to flourish. I think that science can either verify or falsify certain claims of religion. I would say that theology can also provide explanatory resources that would be helpful in explaining the world in ways that science isn't equipped to answer. So there is quite a variety of complex ways in which science and theology interrelate, and we shouldn't be overly simplistic about this.
Yeah.